I'm Evelyn Harper, 36 years old, the woman my husband always looked at with disappointment, simply because I chose to wear plain clothes and live a life that wasn't flashy. What he didn't know was that behind that ordinary appearance, I was hiding a massive secret that would leave them speechless. If you've ever been underestimated just for living differently from what others expected, leave a comment. I want to hear your story. Tonight, at the lavish party held at my parents' mansion, I'll once again face the familiar sneers from my ex-husband Robert, the man who once cheated on me with my own sister. His smug smile, the sarcastic remarks, like I'm still that woman who once clung to food stamps, the pity in my parents' eyes, and the self-satisfaction of my sister Isabella. But this time, I don't need to say a word to defend myself. The truth will speak for me. I stand in front of the mirror in a mid-range hotel room, checking over my simple outfit: a black shirt, dark jeans, and a pair of comfortable flats. My hair is tied neatly back, no fancy makeup. This is exactly the image they expect. Evelyn, the failure, always out of place among their luxury cars and designer dresses. But inside me, a quiet thrill is rising. Tomorrow, the magazine cover will reveal me as the most mysterious CEO in tech. The moment my family, especially Robert, is forced to face the truth about my success will be the sweetest reward after years of being underestimated. I smile at myself in the mirror, ready to walk into this fateful night where everything is about to change forever. I grew up in New York, in a sprawling colonial-style house with 6 bedrooms, a black iron gate that opened onto a gravel driveway where my father's Mercedes and my mother's Range Rover were always parked neatly, symbols of the success they worshipped and the suffocating expectations they placed on me. My parents defined success through Ivy League degrees and marriage to someone from the upper class. My father, Edward Hayes, had built his investment firm from scratch, while my mother, Catherine, came from old money, a family name that opened doors in Manhattan's elite circles. From the time I was little, they laid out the path for me. Elite private schools, Yale like my father, then a career in finance or law, and eventually a marriage to someone worthy. My younger sister Isabella, 3 years my junior, followed the blueprint to perfection. I still remember the garden parties, Isabella in a white dress, beaming beside our parents. I, on the other hand, was always different. While Isabella played the violin and learned ballet, I spent hours taking computers apart and putting them back together with my own modifications. By the time I was 12, my bedroom looked like a mini electronics lab. My parents tolerated my hobby because I still kept perfect grades, but they never understood my passion. Machines are for tech guys, not daughters of the Addams family, Evelyn, my father once said with disdain. Addams women lead institutions, not bury themselves behind screens. And my mother would just sigh, her hand resting on Isabella's shoulder like a reminder of what I wasn't. When I got into Yale on my own merit, my parents exhaled in relief. They thought I was finally on track. I tried to stay on that path. I graduated from Yale and married Robert, a choice my parents considered ideal. In their eyes, I became just a bit more perfect when I walked down the church aisle in a white dress beside him. But within a few years, I found myself trapped in an empty life. The fancy office job my parents had lined up felt like a glass box, glossy but stifling. On sleepless nights, I would replay the moment at Yale when I uncovered a security flaw in the campus network that could have leaked thousands of students' data. The rush in my chest, my hands trembling, as I realized I had touched something big. That was when I felt alive. I quit the office job to start my own company, a decision that set off an explosion in my family. "You're throwing away your future to play with computers?" my mother cried daily. My father threatened to cut me out of the inheritance, thinking it would scare me back in line. But worst of all was Robert. He scoffed, shrugged in front of me and my parents. "She'll never make it." and I'm not throwing money down the drain for this childish hobby." That sentence stabbed into my chest like a cold blade. He didn't even give me a chance to explain. He packed his things and moved back in with his parents, leaving me alone with my dream. With just $10,000 in savings and a security algorithm I had developed myself, I moved into a cramped little apartment, peeling walls, winter wind whistling through the cracks. Those early days were brutal. I lived on nearly expired bread, drank tap water, and worked 18-hour days on a single laptop. 6 months passed. My money ran out. Investors weren't interested. I swallowed my pride and applied for food stamps. On the first day I used them, Robert called to brag about his promotion at the law firm. "How's that little computer project of yours?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm, not even waiting for my answer, before going on about his achievements. I kept the food stamps a secret from my family, but somehow Isabella found out through a mutual acquaintance. At Thanksgiving dinner that year, she brought it up on purpose, her voice sweet but sharp as a knife. "At least you get free food now, since you can't afford to contribute to family meals anymore." The table chuckled, but none of them knew that my little project held the potential to change the world. I had developed an AI-powered security system capable of predicting and stopping cyber attacks with 97% accuracy, far beyond anything else on the market. But investors doubted someone like me, a woman who had quit her job, had no powerful connections. Just a few months later, I discovered a truth more painful than all the mockery. One night, while checking Robert's email on our shared computer for an old document, I stumbled upon messages between him and Isabella, intimate words, photos of them together at a hotel, and plans for secret meetups behind my back. My heart shattered. My husband, the man I once loved, and my sister, the one I once trusted, had betrayed me. That night, I sat alone in the pitch-dark apartment. Arms. After the tearful divorce, I thought I had hit rock bottom, but that was exactly when a small miracle appeared. I received a $500,000 investment from an anonymous investor, someone who truly understood the value of my technology. That money kept NexusGuard alive, just enough for me to finish the product and sign our first contract, with a local bank concerned about the rising threat of cyber attacks. As NexusGuard attracted more clients, I made sure to keep my identity hidden. On paper, I was just Evelyn Harper, the product development director. We created a fictional CEO named E. Harper, someone who never appeared in public, only communicated through written statements or voice-only conference calls. Me, with a slight voice change to mask my identity. In the 5 years that followed, the company grew explosively. From banking, we expanded into government contracts, healthcare systems, and eventually international markets. Tech giants tried to uncover E. Harper's identity, throwing out offers to partner or acquire us, but I maintained anonymity, communicating only through carefully selected representatives. Meanwhile, my family and Robert still believed I was struggling. I continued to live modestly in a humble home in a middle-class neighborhood, driving a reliable but unremarkable car, wearing practical, low-key clothes. I maintained the image of someone just barely getting by. Isabella, now building a luxurious life with Robert in a Cape Cod vacation home, never missed a chance to highlight our contrast. Occasionally, she'd send photos from vacations in the Hamptons, paired with messages laced with passive aggression. "Hope you're doing okay, too." My parents, though not as openly critical as Isabella, still showed their disappointment in subtle ways, from sharp questions about my retirement plans to financial offers over email that were really reminders of the failure they assumed I was living. Robert, in the rare times we crossed paths, always looked at me with a blend of pity and smugness, as if the divorce had proved he was right to leave. Last month, Forbes reached out to NexusGuard to do a special feature. After 5 years of outstanding success, with the company now valued at $10 billion, the executive team felt it was time to reveal the identity of its mysterious founder. After much thought, I agreed. especially because it coincided with the launch of a revolutionary new personal security product designed to protect users from even the most sophisticated scams and identity theft. The interview took place at our headquarters, with professional photos taken against the backdrop of our development lab. I spoke candidly about my journey, the innovations we'd built, and why I had kept my identity hidden for so long. In the male dominated world of tech, a woman's name makes everything twice as hard. The article is set to be published next week, titled, Meet the Most Mysterious Billionaire CEO in Tech. My personal net worth, conservatively estimated at $4.5 billion, will become public knowledge. But fate always has a sense of humor, because right at that moment, my parents sent an invitation, a reunion party, the first since I cut ties with them 5 years ago, the day they sided with Isabella and Robert, openly supporting that betrayal. I remember sitting by the window for a long time, the letter in my hand, my heart heavy. The old shame had never truly faded, but this time I'll walk in looking exactly the way they remember. Waiting for the moment everything changes. Just as I was getting ready for the party, my phone buzzed with a call from my communications manager. Evelyn, the Forbes issue got released earlier than expected. A few print copies have already reached readers today, instead of tomorrow, my heart pounded. I checked the time, 6:30. The party started at 7. Logic told me I could show up, eat a little, then leave before anyone noticed. But deep inside, a part of me wanted to be there when the truth came out. 10 years of enduring contempt and mockery. I deserved a front row seat to see their faces when the curtain fell. Thanks for the heads up, I told her gently. I have to go. Family dinner. She laughed, fully understanding the situation. Good luck. Call me after the fireworks. I hung up, stood quietly in front of the wardrobe, briefly debating what to wear. For a moment, I thought about putting on an expensive dress, carrying a designer handbag, just to stir up a little curiosity before the truth exploded. But then I chose to keep the image they were familiar with. A plain black blouse, dark jeans, worn-out flats, hair tied in a ponytail, makeup so light it was barely there. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the version of Evelyn my family had etched in their minds. Dull, unimpressive, never enough. And I smiled softly. Perfect. The drive from the hotel to the mansion took 20 minutes. I could have stayed at one of Manhattan's finest hotels, but I chose a modest place near the airport, just another layer of my familiar disguise. As we turned onto the long, private driveway leading to the house, memories flooded back. Summer parties where I always felt out of place among my parents' friends' kids, and the day I walked away after confronting my sister about the betrayal, with my father's disappointed stare following me from the porch. The house appeared, grand as ever, with its familiar architecture. Light poured from every window, illuminating the neatly trimmed lawn and carefully groomed hedges. 3 luxury cars already occupied the circular driveway: a Mercedes, a Range Rover, and an unfamiliar Bentley, probably Robert and Isabella's. I parked my 10-year-old Toyota behind the Bentley, the contrast almost laughable. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the gift bag, a rare bottle of wine no one in the family would recognize the value of, and walked toward the massive wooden door. Before I could ring the bell, it opened, revealing Henry, my parents' longtime butler. Unlike the rest of the family, Henry had always treated me with genuine respect. "Miss Evelyn, welcome home," he said warmly. "Henry, how are you?" I asked. "Very well, thank you. And you?" There was a glimmer in his eyes. "I'm doing all right, thank you," I replied, handing him the wine. "An excellent choice," Henry remarked, examining the bottle with appreciation, as if he recognized its value despite the unassuming packaging. I stepped into the living room, where laughter echoed and soft piano music played in the background. With every step, I felt myself shrinking back into that familiar role I'd played for years. The failed daughter, the family embarrassment, the cautionary tale parents told their friends' kids about what happens when you don't follow the plan. The voices grew louder as I neared the living room. Isabella's sharp, controlled laugh rang out, always flawless, just like everything else about her. My mother's voice was soft and measured. My father's deep, authoritative tone filled the space, used to commanding attention. I paused at the threshold. My mother, wearing a fitted navy dress, was accepting congratulations. My father, silver-haired and dignified, stood by the fireplace with a glass of red wine, chatting with Uncle Harold. Isabella and Robert sat prominently on the leather sofa, posed like a magazine spread. Cousin Emily spotted me first. "Evelyn, you made it!" Her warm greeting pulled everyone's attention toward the door. Instantly, the room's energy shifted. My mother's smile faltered. My father's expression stayed neutral, but his shoulders tensed. Robert's eyes swept over my outfit, and the smirk on his face said it all. It was exactly what he expected. Nothing impressive. "Sweetheart, you're here," my mother said, crossing the room to kiss the air near my cheek. "We weren't sure you could take time off." The sarcasm in her tone nearly made me laugh. If only she knew that taking time off meant rescheduling calls with global tech leaders and delegating million-dollar decisions. "I couldn't miss it," I replied honestly. Despite everything, they were still my family, and a part of me still longed for their approval. My father nodded, not bothering to step forward. "Glad you could make it." Robert approached, Isabella right behind him. "Evelyn," he said, his eyes scanning me. With judgment, gently swirling his wineglass. "That blouse still looks fine. Isn't that the one you wore when we divorced, 5 years ago?" And just like that, it began. The subtle jabs, the backhanded compliments, the reminders of the lowly place they believed I occupied. The feeling was so familiar, it was almost comforting, like an itchy old sweater I'd worn too long to throw away. I smiled and gave a flat, "Hello, everyone." No comebacks, no explanations. I let them wallow in their own arrogance. The next 30 minutes passed with small talk among distant relatives. Every conversation revolved around someone else's achievement. A new yacht, Emily's daughter getting early admission to Dartmouth, Robert's latest legal win, Isabella's soon-to-be-launched charity foundation. When asked about my life, I gave vague answers. Work was busy but good. Dodging questions about relationships or finances. Each evasion only reinforced their assumptions. Evelyn was still struggling, still lost, still the family's underachiever. When Henry announced dinner was ready, we entered the grand dining room. The long mahogany table gleamed with crystal glasses and polished silverware. Fresh flower arrangements lined the center. I wasn't surprised to find myself seated at the far end, next to Aunt Judith, far from the honorary seats where Isabella and Robert sat near our parents. Throughout the meal, everyone took turns bragging. Isabella talked about their new house in the Hamptons. Robert recounted his connections with powerful figures. I spoke little, letting Uncle Richard dominate the head of the table with stories about golfing in Ireland. "Hey, Evelyn," Robert called across the table during a lull. "Still working at that little company? What exactly do you do there? Tech support." His tone made it clear he thought he already knew the answer, and that it fit his view of me. Isabella smiled encouragingly, as if genuinely interested, but I knew she was just setting up a contrast. "I work in security software development," I replied plainly. "Sounds technical," my mother commented, though her tone was far from enthusiastic. My father frowned slightly. "At your age, you should be thinking about moving up." "I'm sure Evelyn is doing her best," Isabella chimed in, her fake support sounding patronizing. Robert added, "Managing a few employees must be exhausting for her." Laughter erupted. I looked at each of them, then said nothing. In my mind, I saw the Nexus Guard offices, hundreds of employees awaiting my direction, international contracts spread across the conference table. If they knew the truth, would they still laugh like this? "The tech talent market's actually doing well," I said softly. "I'm doing fine." "Fine is fine when you're young," my father replied. "But eventually, you have to think about building real assets, property, investments, retirement planning." Speaking of property, Robert slid in smoothly. We just bought a beautiful lakefront lot. Breaking ground on a vacation home this spring. And just like that, the conversation returned to the success of those who had followed the right path. I ate in silence, observing my family like an outsider. Isabella and Robert dominated the table, recounting their travels. Each story carefully crafted to highlight their success while maintaining the illusion of humility, a skill she'd mastered over the years. When she wrapped up, basking in murmurs of praise, a cousin turned to me and asked, "Evelyn, tell us about your life." Anything interesting? All eyes turned to me, full of expectation. The trap was set. Anything important I shared would be overshadowed by what had already been flaunted. Any humble answer would only confirm their view of me as a failure. "Work keeps me busy," I replied. "But I enjoy what I do." "What about your personal life?" my mother pressed. "Anyone special, sweetheart?" "You're not getting any younger." Robert glanced at Isabella with affection. "Having a supportive partner makes all the difference in building a successful life. Robert's been a huge help in my career. He handles the home stuff when I'm deep in casework." The room fell quiet. The dinner momentarily derailed. "I'm sure Evelyn meets interesting people in the tech world," Cousin Emily tried, kindly but clueless. "Probably all computer geeks," Isabella chuckled. "I have a boyfriend," I said. The silence returned, but this time no one followed up. The second bottle of wine was poured, a rare kind my father began describing in detail. I recognized it instantly, having bought several cases for my collection last year, but I kept a polite expression, pretending ignorance, as he lectured on its origin and taste. "This vineyard only produces 500 bottles a year," he said. "It's incredibly hard to get." When dessert was served, the conversation shifted to finances. My father always believed talking about money was appropriate within family, a philosophy that had fueled decades of comparisons and status checking. "Robert and I are considering setting up a trust fund for our future kids," Isabella announced, delicately spooning a small bite of dessert. "Smart decision," my father nodded approvingly. "We set up trusts for our children when they were born, though, of course, they're only to be used for wise decisions." He stressed the last part while looking directly at me. It was a deliberate misrepresentation. I had never touched the trust fund, which remained untouched, but was modest compared to the additional gifts and bonuses Isabella received for her right choices. "Actually, I never knew about the trust fund," I corrected calmly, "and I never needed to use it. I wanted to build something on my own." Isabella chuckled. "Yes, your famous independence. Though, if I remember right, that independence led to some pretty tough years. Mom told me you used to shop at discount grocery stores." My mother looked a little embarrassed. "I only mentioned it out of concern, sweetheart. There's nothing shameful about accepting help from family during hard times." "I remember those days," Isabella continued, clearly enjoying the topic. "Didn't you receive public assistance at one point?" "Food stamps, right?" The table went quiet for a second. Even in this family, calling out someone's financial hardship was crossing a line. But Isabella always knew how to push just far enough to maintain her innocence. "Isabella!" my mother gently objected. "What? I'm just stating facts," Isabella replied with feigned innocence. "Lots of people need help sometimes." "You have to own your poor choices," Robert nodded in agreement. "Over 90% of startups fail in the first 5 years. Without family backing or major capital, it's even worse," my father added, staring directly at me. "That's why we always stress the importance of safe choices." I took a sip of wine, considering my response. For years, I'd let comments like this slide, knowing that one day the truth would come out. And now, that day was just a few hours away. Part of me wanted to end the charade right then, pull out my phone and show them the Forbes preview. But the deeper part of me, the one that had endured their judgment, wanted them to keep believing their false version of me, right up until it crumbled. "I learned a lot from those hard years," I said carefully. "Sure," Isabella replied, her voice dripping with superiority. And now, what, 5 years later? Still at the same job, same old clothes, same cheap car. Isabella, my mother whispered, sensing she'd gone too far. But Isabella ignored her. I mean, are you still on social assistance? She asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Because if things are still tough, we can help find you something more suitable. Robert knows some companies looking for admin staff. The room went silent. The only sound, the soft clinking of cutlery. I gripped my utensils tightly, but just smiled faintly. The entire room fell into an awkward silence, but no one defended Isabella. My father suddenly became fixated on his wine glass, as if it held the secrets of the universe. My mother carefully rearranged the napkin on her lap. Other guests exchanged quiet glances. I tightened my grip on my utensils, but only gave a faint smile. I thought back to my journey over the past 5 years. Nights sleeping on a floor mattress in my first office, investors dismissing me without even hearing the full pitch. The first employees who believed in my vision even when we could barely afford payroll. The brutal climb of Nexus Guard, from a desperate gamble to a global cybersecurity giant, and the man who sold everything to wire me $500,000. His smile appeared in my mind. And suddenly, I felt calm. These people, with their narrow definition of success and their carefully curated lives, no longer had the power to hurt me. Before I could respond to Isabella's jab about food stamps, Henry appeared at the doorway with an unusually formal expression. "Pardon the interruption," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the dining room. "There's a special delivery for Miss Evelyn." Every eye turned to him, then to me. I hadn't arranged any deliveries, and for a moment, I was genuinely confused. Henry stepped aside as another staff member walked in, holding a magazine with the cover turned away. The timing was too perfect, almost staged, though I knew it was just coincidence. "The courier insisted it be delivered immediately," Henry explained, his face revealing nothing as the staffer approached me. When the magazine was turned around, the Forbes cover appeared for the entire table to see. My professional photo stared back at them, beside the bold headline, "Meet the most mysterious billionaire CEO in tech." The room felt like all the air had been sucked out. Looking up, I scanned the frozen faces around the table. Each one showed shock in its own way. My father, mid-sip when the magazine appeared, now sat frozen, his wine glass still raised, his face pale as realization hit. My mother, always composed, now showed visible cracks, her mouth slightly open, eyes wide in disbelief. I saw Robert's hand tremble, spilling wine onto the pristine white tablecloth. His face had gone ghostly, as if someone had slapped him. Isabella had the strongest reaction. All color drained from her face, leaving her skin a stark white under flawless makeup. Her eyes flicked between the magazine and me, as if searching for a sign this was a joke. No. No way. I placed the magazine on the table, its cover clearly visible. "Looks like the release date was moved up," I said calmly. "It was supposed to hit shelves tomorrow morning." "Evelyn, you—" my mother stammered, gesturing toward the magazine, unable to finish a sentence. My father finally lowered his wineglass, a few drops spilling onto the cloth in his stunned moment. "Evelyn," he said, his usual commanding voice now tinged with uncertainty. "What is this?" I took a deep breath, savoring the moment I'd imagined countless times. "Yes, I'm the CEO of Nexus Guard, the one you've all been calling E. Harper." Robert let out a nervous laugh, grasping for an out. You're joking, right? That has to be some kind of mistake." I leaned back slightly in my chair, eyes steady. "There's no mistake. But that company is worth—" Robert began, his finance-trained mind immediately doing the math. "As of the latest valuation, over $10 billion, I said, finishing for him. "The article estimates my personal net worth at about $4.5 billion, though that's a bit conservative." Isabella let out a faint, choked sound. Around the table, expressions shifted, from shock to doubt, to the first flickers of recalculation. Why did you hide this from the family? My mother finally asked, her voice shaking. I had anticipated that question, but hearing it aloud made it clear they never truly understood me. When I started Nexus Guard, no one in this family believed in me or my vision, I said simply. Keeping the CEO identity private was initially a business strategy. I wanted my work judged fairly, without gender bias, and because of this family. Because for years, especially you, Robert, treated me with such condescension. But after you succeeded, why keep pretending? My father pressed, his business instincts kicking in. I didn't answer him. I looked straight at Isabella. She finally spoke, her voice full of accusation, though her eyes betrayed hurt. You lied to all of us. Pretended to be poor for years just to pull this stunt today? Robert nodded in agreement. She's always been like that. Always hiding things. Even when we were married, she was never honest. I sat up straighter, eyes locked on them. My voice was firm. No, I never lied to anyone. You're the ones who painted the picture of me. A failure, a charity case. I simply chose silence, not rebuttal. The brutal truth hung in the air. My parents exchanged uneasy glances, perhaps finally seeing the daughter they had ignored for a decade. You could have told us when things got better, my father argued, as if I had robbed him of rightful pride. Would it have changed the way you saw me as a person? I asked. Because I believe a child shouldn't have to become a billionaire to earn their parents' respect. The weight of that sentence settled over the table. For the first time in my life, I had the full attention of my entire family. No one checked their phone. No one looked away. No one waited to change the subject to a more impressive achievement. Robert, ever pragmatic, was clearly re-evaluating me, his gaze now showing interest instead of disdain. My parents remained stunned, occasionally glancing at the magazine as if to confirm it wasn't a dream. My father, always spotting opportunity, seemed to be rewriting the family narrative in his mind, probably imagining how he'd brag to friends about his self-made billionaire daughter. Only Isabella stayed silent, her face a complex mix of emotions. The sister who had always defined herself in comparison to me now had to confront a new reality. As the initial shock faded, the questions grew more specific. What exactly does Nexus Guard do? Am I really worth billions? Each answer seemed to shift their perception, their understanding of me reshaping before my eyes. For the first time, I was no longer failed Evelyn. I was successful Evelyn, powerful Evelyn, Evelyn worth listening to. But the irony, that it took a massive fortune just to earn basic respect, didn't go unnoticed. My father, ever strategic, was the first to try salvaging the situation. This is surprising, yes, but incredible, he said, raising his glass. Congratulations, Evelyn. Your success has far exceeded all our expectations. We always knew you had potential, sweetheart. That transparent attempt to rewrite history might have worked on another day. But tonight, with the sting of their 5 years of dismissal still fresh, it rang hollow. Really? I asked softly. Because I clearly remember being told I'd thrown my life away. That I'd never succeed without the right degree or connections. That all I did was play with computers. My father set his glass down, unused to having his polished narratives challenged. Maybe we were wrong about some things, my mother cautiously admitted, but we only wanted what was best for you. What you thought was best, I corrected, based on a very narrow definition of success. Isabella finally spoke, her voice taut with layered emotions. I guess it must feel good, seeing us all underestimate you for years. One big, elaborate game. She tried to frame me as the villain, twisting my privacy into manipulation. But before I could answer, an unexpected ally spoke up. Isabella, Robert said sharply, startling both her and me. I think we should all reflect on how we treated Evelyn before judging her choices. Isabella stared at Robert, stunned. He had never publicly contradicted her before. Their perfect alignment, a key part of their image, now had a visible crack. I seized the moment. I never saw this as revenge, I said honestly. At first, I kept my success private, because I didn't want it to change how people treated me. I wanted relationships based on who I really was, not what I had. But over time, I realized this family had already decided who I was, and no normal kind of success could ever change that. So you waited until you were on the cover of Forbes? Isabella asked, a hint of her usual sharpness returning. I agreed to the Forbes interview because the time was right, I explained. Nexus Guard is launching a new personal security product next month that could help millions. Going public serves the company's mission. The fact that it coincided with tonight's dinner is just a coincidence, though I won't lie, I'm glad it happened. Around the table, I could see each family member processing in their own way. My father was likely calculating business partnerships, my mother picturing how to brag at her country club, Isabella rethinking a lifetime of rivalry, Robert ever pragmatic, probably thinking about investment opportunities. But none of them, I realized with a twinge of sadness and resignation, were thinking about me as a person, just as an asset. Some things, it seems, not even billions can change. My father, always the realist, shifted into damage control mode. We should discuss a media strategy, he said, switching to business mode. The family will be linked to your success. There'll be more attention, interview requests. I gave a faint smile, unsurprised that he was already pivoting to how this could benefit the family, instead of grasping the true meaning of my journey. To them, everything only has value when it can be quantified. I gripped my water glass a little tighter, knowing that no matter how much truth was laid out, in their eyes, I would still only ever be a resource. And that's when it truly hit me. Their approval was never something I needed to move forward. I set my water glass down and took a long breath. The dinner had gone on too long, and the mix of envy and desire in my family's eyes was suffocating. I quietly said, "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." My voice was calm, but my feet moved faster, like they couldn't wait to escape the heaviness of that room. As I stepped into the hallway, the sound of classical music from the living room still echoed. I paused in front of a large mirror mounted on the wall, its ornate gold frame reflecting my image. Hair tied neatly in a ponytail, a simple black blouse, and eyes carrying a story none of them ever cared to ask about. I hadn't taken another step when I heard the sharp sound of leather shoes against the floor. Robert appeared, wearing a tailored suit, his once confident smile now tinged with hesitation. "Evelyn!" he called, his voice low but deliberately warm, as if we were still close. I turned around, arms crossed, eyebrows raised, waiting. He stopped a few steps away, hands in his pockets, the posture of someone trying to appear relaxed, but clearly weighing every word. I just wanted to say, I'm genuinely impressed. I mean, damn, over $4 billion? Who would have thought, right? He gave a soft chuckle, like sharing an inside joke, but his eyes were sharp, calculating, like an investor sizing up a deal. "What do you want, Robert?" I asked bluntly, not willing to drag this out. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "Look, I know things between us got messy. You don't have to live like this anymore. Old car, cheap clothes, tiny apartment. You could upgrade everything. You deserve better, and, I mean..." He paused, inhaled deeply, then met my eyes. "I was wrong to let you go, Evelyn." What I said back then, the mockery. I'm sorry. I really am. You and me. We could start over. His apology sounded like a worn-out recording, missing the sincerity I once craved from him. I looked at him, the man who had betrayed me with my own sister, standing here thinking a few hollow words and a smile could erase the scars he left. I smiled, not out of joy, but because of the bitter irony of it all. "Robert," I said, my voice steady and cold, "you think an apology can erase years of betrayal and abandonment?" You don't want to come back because you love me. You just realized how valuable I've become. His face stiffened. The smile disappeared. But before he could respond, a figure appeared at the corner of the hallway. Isabella, in her flawless silk dress, stood there, fists clenched, eyes blazing with fury. She'd clearly heard everything. You said what, Robert? Go back to her? Her voice shrill, full of rage. Robert turned, flustered, raising his hands as if to calm her. Let me explain. Explain? Isabella cut him off, stepping closer, her voice trembling with anger. You just asked her to take you back, right in front of me. After everything we've been through, you have the nerve to flirt with her just because she's a billionaire. Robert's face flushed red, and he stammered for words, but Isabella didn't give him the chance. You're disgusting, Robert. I chose you, despite everything, and now you do this? Her voice cracked, blending hurt and rage, echoing through the hallway. I stood there, silently watching the chaos, accusations and choked sobs filling the corridor. Without saying a word, I turned and walked past Isabella and Robert, their shouting fading behind me. I pushed open the mansion's grand door and stepped outside. The night air hit me, cool and refreshing. My old Toyota still sat in the driveway, dwarfed by luxury cars, but it was mine, paid for with sweat and grit. As I drove away, the mansion's lights dimmed in my rearview mirror. I didn't need their approval, their hollow apologies, and I certainly didn't need to return to something already broken. I felt light, like, finally, I was free. Act 7. 3 months after the dinner that changed everything, I sat in a modern conference room overlooking the Seattle skyline, finalizing the last details for Nexus Guard's first funding cycle. The fund, seeded with $200 million from my personal assets, would support promising tech entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, especially those, like me, who had faced countless obstacles along their journey. The application portal opens next Tuesday. Rachel, my fund director, confirmed as she reviewed the schedule. The press release goes out Monday morning. Excellent, I nodded, skimming the final criteria. What about the mentorship program? 15 industry leaders have confirmed, including 8 women in tech leadership roles. Each recipient will be matched with a mentor aligned to their project's focus. This fund was everything I had once longed for when starting out. Financial support without strings from family, guidance from people who understood technical challenges, and access to networks that had once slammed shut in my face. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother, confirming Sunday's meeting at 11 a.m. Isabella, Robert, and the family will be there. Looking forward to seeing you. My relationship with my family had evolved in unexpected ways since that fateful night. The initial reactions, shock, opportunism, and the urge to rewrite history, had gradually given way to something more subtle as the reality of my success settled in. My father, after several attempts to meddle in my finances, had finally accepted my boundaries with reluctant respect. We found common ground discussing broad business strategies, and while he still occasionally hinted at family-benefiting opportunities, he no longer assumed authority over my decisions. My mother had made the most sincere effort to rebuild our relationship. Our weekly calls now included genuine questions about my work, not just my social life. While she still didn't fully understand my technology, she'd stopped referring to it as a computer hobby. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Isabella and Robert were the most complicated. Still entangled in their mess, they occasionally tried to pull me into it. With Robert, I kept a firm distance. He continued to reach out, sending long texts about past misunderstandings, but I was no longer interested in late apologies. I set clear boundaries with everyone. Sunday brunches were now a regular, but non-obligatory commitment, and I joined family gatherings on my own terms, no longer feeling compelled to endure judgment or critique. At our last family meeting, I'd sent them an invitation to my simple wedding with Ryan, my once mysterious investor. He didn't come from a prominent family, had no massive real estate holdings or flashy bank accounts, But he understood me. Not Evelyn the billionaire, but Evelyn who once slept on an office floor, who ate expired bread but never gave up on her dream. He sold everything and quietly stood by me through the startup years, the one who held me, encouraged me when I was close to giving up. That invitation was an olive branch, but also a declaration. I would live life on my terms, with people who saw the real me. The Forbes article had opened doors I hadn't anticipated. As one of the few female tech billionaires with an unusual story, I was invited to speak at conferences, universities, and industry events. When the meeting ended, I walked to the window, looking down at the city where my journey had begun. The Evelyn who once slept on the office floor felt like a lifetime ago, and yet somehow, just yesterday. Wealth, fame, influence, all valuable, but merely tools to create the change I wanted to see in the world. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Isabella. Robert and I are considering investing in a tech startup. Would love your thoughts if you have time. I smiled softly at the text. It represented both progress and lingering issues. On one hand, Isabella acknowledged my expertise and sought input. On the other, there was still a hint of wanting access to what I had, wanting to replicate my success now that it had been validated by the world. I replied, happy to review their business plan. Send me the details, I'll make time next week. Small steps, imperfect progress. But real relationships are built that way, not through dramatic reveals or instant change. That evening, as I sat in my small kitchen, a scented candle flickering in the corner, a glass of wine gently swirling in my hand, I could feel a new beginning unfolding. No more loud battles, just the steady breathing of the man I love beside me, and the quiet belief that this journey had finally brought me exactly where I belong. And I understood everything that had happened, the betrayal, the humiliation, the dismissal, had simply paved the way for me to stand here today. Freedom doesn't come from being recognized by others, but from the moment you no longer need that recognition to feel whole. If you've ever stepped away from a relationship, a belief, or a cycle of expectations just to be who you truly are, share your story in the comments. What have you overcome? How are you starting again? Hit subscribe if you believe that sometimes the most powerful response is silence and a brand new life. And if this video resonated with you, please like it so more people can find it. See you next time.